Hi everyone, and welcome to Darlene's Creative Studio. I apologize for any of the shadows that you're going to get while I'm recording this video. It is cloudy outside. We're actually looking to get some snow this afternoon, just before Easter. And I started working on this project last night. I've been cleaning out my studio, and what I did was I created a basket off to the side with some projects that I had started or ideas that I had, and I gathered some supplies together and kind of stacked them in little piles everywhere. So what I did was I got a big basket and I put all these little excuse me, projects in a basket. And what I've been doing in the last couple of days, I haven't really been wanting to create too many large journals. I'm trying to destash and use up some of my scraps. So I'm just going to take a sip of my tea here. I've been going through my scrap bin or my project bin, I call it, and just pulling out some little projects that I could work on and get rid of some of the leftover stash that I have. So, excuse me, I came across, I've been fussy cutting and we're tearing apart some of the books that I want to use some of the pages of. And I came across some gardening books that I had, and in those books they each had what I would call a title page for the type of flower that was in the book. So this, I believe, was roses. So I had saved all those title pages and put them aside, and when I came across them the other day when I was going through my stash, I thought, I'm gonna make something with these. And so all I did was went through everything that I have. I didn't want to buy anything. I want to use things that I have. So I grabbed some file folders that I bought at the dollar store for another project that I was going to work on. And all I've done is opened up the file folders, and I'm going to show you how I've created these tall, thin journals using the file folder. And I haven't decided what I'm going to put in them yet. Right now I'm just creating the outside covers. And then maybe you could give me a couple of suggestions in the comments. I will continue the video and show you what I do put inside them, but it'd be interesting to see what other people come up with, what ideas you come up with to put inside something this long like this. So I'm going to really quickly show you basically what I'm doing. So I'm taking these file folders. Let me just open this package. Actually, I'll take one of these unopened ones here. These are a little bit thinner. These are more like paper, and I like the other ones. They're more cardstocky, but this one's more paper. So all I've been doing is the book page of the flowers, and I've got a couple of others as well. This is another one. So these were just, like, say, title pages, and they were approximately 8.5 by 11s. It was a normal size book. So all I did was rip the pages out, and then when I grabbed my file folder, I tried to figure out what was the basic size I could come up with. So with a regular file folder, if I want to cut it, you know, cut off all these tabs and everything, I can get an 8-inch wide by, the max I can do is 11.5. So all I did was, first of all, cut the file folder to 8. So I just took it over to my chopper and I put it in my, actually what I did was cut off a very, very, very small sliver on the fold, so I ended up with 2 pieces. So that was my first step, and I just literally cut that off. And it's not even 1/8 of an inch, it's just like a 1/16 of an inch. So I cut that off, so I end up with 2 pieces. And then I keep those together. I didn't separate it, I just leave it together, and then I would cut off the 8 inches. So let me just do that real quickly. So then I end up with 2 pieces. So this is the 11, this is the length. And then see, the one corner does have a little funny notch. So when I do cut it down, I want to make sure that I cut off that end so I don't have that funny little notch on the bottom. Now my book pages, I ended up cutting the flower pages down to about 8 by 10s, maybe 8 by 10 1/4. However large I could get all of the flowers still in the image. So I'm going to say 8 by 10. So what I was doing was cutting my file folders to about 10 1/4. If my page was 8 by 10, I would cut it to 8 by 10 1/4. If my page was a little longer, if it was maybe 10 1/8 or something, then I would go to 10 1/2. But you always want to have 1/8 of an inch taller than your actual book page. So I'm just going to cut this one at 10 1/2 just to be on the safe side, because I haven't got an actual picture to put on it. So 10 1/2. So I've cut off that little funny piece, and you can keep these and make tabs out of these, reinforcement holes, use these for book plates. So keep your scraps. And again, my scrap bin is growing. And then you take this piece and you put it in your scoreboard. Let me just move some of my goodies here. Now I know that this piece is 8 inches for sure. So I'm going to put it in my scoreboard, and I know it's 8 inches. So all I've done is gone to the 4 inches, and I don't want to score it at 4 inches. I want to score it 1 notch over from the 4 inches on the left and on the right, so that we end up with a 1/8 spine. So I'm going to put my pointer at the 4 inches. Here, I'm going up here. And I'm just going to go over 1 notch, and that's where I'm going to score there. Go back to my 4 inches and go over to the right 1 notch and go there. So I'm going to end up with, and I'll just score it really quickly to show you. Now, this is a fairly thin one, so I don't want to push too hard. But file folders, you would have to push hard to get through. There. So you're going to end up with a 1/8 seam there on your paper. And then I just took my corner rounder, paper punch, and I round out all my corners. That. Okay. And then I'm going to fold on those score lines. And I'm using my bone folder. And then we're going to fold it on the other score line. Right now I'm working on, like I say, a lot of little tiny projects. So I was thinking of maybe creating one of these as a project book so that I could keep all the instructions and measurements and stuff like that for each project in something like this, so I could make some pages inside and have the written instructions, the measurements, the tools I used, and that type of thing, and then maybe just add a label on the front of what project it was, so that I can always go back if I wanted to make another one and have all the instructions written down. Instead of having a great big huge book, I could just have a couple of smaller ones. Maybe one could be, I could have 2 or 3 projects in there using, projects using file folders or something like that, and then having the instructions inside. So that was one of the ideas I was thinking of using these for. So anyway, so now we have our little, and I'll hold it this way so you can see, we have a 1/8 spine, and then our 2 pages. And then I just took my distress ink and I ran around the whole outside edges. And you want to make sure you do your fold this way. And you want to make sure you do your spine this way. Okay, and the same on the other side. You want to do the spine on that side, and then the spine on that side, and go all the way around the outside. Now, when I go to do the insides, and I haven't done that far yet, I will distress the insides as well and put paper and everything on the insides. But for the outsides, I went and spent, you know, a good 5 to 10 minutes, and I just distressed all the edges and my spine on both sides like that. And then I took my book page, and it ended up being, I didn't want to put it on the spine. If you put paper over your spine and you bend it, you're going to get a funny little crease. So I decided with this particular project I would cut the page to make it fit. So what I have, and I'll give you one that I'm working on now. Let me just move these guys out of the way. So what I did is I folded my paper in half exactly. and I cut it on the cutter. So this is my page, what it looks like before it was cut. And here is one of my folders, and it's all distressed. And then I have just a bunch of, this is my leftover sari silk. This is all I have left in stock, so I'm just trying to use up what I have. Again, I'm not going out and buying anything new. This was something that I bought a while ago and just had it in a jar. And I thought, why not just use up what I have? So, I've cut my page, folded it, and then cut it on my cutter so it's exactly in half. And then when I put it on to the front of my journal here, this one actually will fit fairly well. I'm just going to trim it a little bit more because I do want a little bit of the edge to show, and that's really, really tight. So I'm just going to trim that back a tiny bit, like maybe a 1/16 of an inch, and we're just going to trim that down. I'm just going to do the other one. So about a 1/16 of an inch, just to give it enough that you can see there. That's a little better, so you can see the edges. And then I'm just going to take my distress ink, and I'm just going to distress. Now you won't be able to see it as much where there's a lot of flowers, but you will have that white on the side of the page that will stand out a little bit more. So it's better to just go right up the page and just give it a quick distress, and then it takes away from that white shiny edge. So there we go. We've got that piece done there. And we're just going to do the other side. And I'm just doing this really quickly. I don't want to put too much distressing, but I just wanted to make it look a little different there. So let's move that out of the way. And then what I do is I take my, there it is, and I normally will set this down on my table the way it's supposed to go. You do not want to end up gluing one of these on upside down, so I always set it the way it's supposed to go. Then I take my file folder and I measure. This is 10 1/4, so I want to go 5 1/8. I want to make a mark, and then I want to just make some marks about the width of my sari ribbon. So you always want to make the center mark first, 5 1/8, and then this is just random. I'm just making some marks, so I know my ribbon's going to go there, but that is my center. I'm just going to flip it over and do it on the other side here. 5 1/8, and just general marks to see the width of my ribbon. 5 1/8, like that. And then I'm going to open this up. So that is where my sari ribbon is going to go. I'm going to take my Fabri-Tac, and I'm just putting a quick scooch across this to tack it down. Then I'm going to take my sari ribbon and I'm going to find the center. I'm going to put the two ends together and find the center of my ribbon. And I want to make sure I open it up. Sorry, it's really close to the camera there. I'm going to open it up and I'm going to set it down on that spine, and then I'm going to go from right across, and I'm going to open up that sari ribbon a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to flatten it out a little bit because you're putting the book page on top of this. There we go. So just flatten that out like that. Then I take my book page and I add some Fabri-Tac glue, and you want to make sure you get right to those edges. Not right at the edge, but very, very close, so that when you flatten it out, the glue will ooze to the edge. Okay, so we're just going to finish gluing this little bit here. And then what I do is I try and lay it down and match up one side so that's fairly straight from top to bottom, like that. And then I get my brayer and I just rub over the ribbon really quickly. Oops, I moved it a bit. And then bray it out to flatten it like that. So let's do the back. Oops, getting the pieces of sari ribbon floating around here. And again, gluing right to the edges about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge, or maybe a 1/16 of an inch away from the edge. If you glue it right on the edge, when you push down with your brayer, it will ooze out and you'll end up with glue oozing up the side of the page. So you want to just get as close as you can to the edge, but leave that little tiny gap for the glue to ooze a bit. Alright, my lid on that. And again, the same thing. I want to make sure my sari ribbon is somewhat flat. And I'm going to lay this down and try and keep it as even as possible with the front page and with the spine. And then let it drop, and I'm going to hold it so it doesn't move. Go over my ribbon and down. Like that. And there we have the fronts of our journals. It's just a file folder, and I've got my sari ribbon, and I'm going to tie a nice big bow. And then on the inside, I haven't got that far yet, but I do want to just stress all the edges. And then I'm going to put some paper on the inside. I'm not going to put anything on the spine here. I don't want it so that when I'm bending it, it'll interfere with the bending. Excuse me. But I am going to put some paper on the inside, and I might even put some of those layered pockets in here so that I can put some tags in here. So if I have the papers and I'm working on a project and I think of something afterwards, I can write it on the tag and then washi tape it to the page of the project that I'm working on. And I'm going to try and maybe put 2 or 3 projects in one, but at least if I have some spare paper or some spare tags in some envelopes here, then it'll be easier for me. And then maybe even one of the tags I can have at the back, just with all the lists of the books that I used. If I got book pages from a specific book and I really like the book pages, maybe I can mark that down so that if I ever want to buy the book again, if I want to go into a used bookstore or go into a used bookstore, at least I know what the name of the book was and the author and that type of thing. So it's good to keep stuff like that on hand, so if you ever want to go back and try and make a project again, you have it all together in one little thing. And then I can put a nice little label on this and call it file folder journals or something like that. But so that's basically what I'm working on now. I will continue and show you what I do on the inside, but I'm going to stop here and then I'll just add to the video once I get to the inside. But I'm going to go ahead and finish adding the sari ribbon to these book pages and file folders. And these are some of the ones that I've done so far. So there was quite a few different books that I think it was a set that I bought, and it had quite a few nice flower pages in it. So these are just the ones that I'm working on. This one was my original, and here's some of the ideas for the pages inside of maybe doing something like this where you could write in each day. But for a project I might do like my tools and then have this as a long box with some of the writing instructions and stuff like that. So that's what I'm thinking of doing for inside of this for each one. And then maybe on the second page having a nice long box for more instructions, and another long box, and then go to another project and maybe have a space there. But that's kind of my first one that I did, and I did put the paper on the back, and it is kind of rippling a little bit, so I didn't want to do it for the rest of them. But this was my sample one that I used, and I just used my tea stain cotton for that one. But that's kind of what I'm working on. I do have one that was a rose, and I did not put a spine on this one. And this one is a rose book page, and see how the paper is crinkling there because I put it on the spine. So it's better to cut the page and have it in 1/8 of an inch so that it doesn't do that rippling there. But this was another page from another book that I really liked, so that's just a sample one that I had. And I'm just going to go ahead and finish these last few here and get them all together, and then we'll come back and see what we do for the inside. So this is how many we've gotten so far. These are just the garden books and some of the sari ribbon that I had left over. And I'm going to start to work on the insides. I'm going to look for some paper in my scraps. I must have had a couple of this book because I think I have 2 or 3 of that picture. Get a nice pink one, pinky purple. Another yellow. think there's another one. So I had 3 of these pages. So I must have had a couple of these books, or else they were in the same title page in some of the other books. And then this was my original one that I had the paper going across. And I don't know if you can see it, but it's really wrinkled, the cover. And I just used a cotton thread, and then that was my ribbon. And then I took some other book pages that I had. These are some of the bird book pages that I used to cover up my tea tins in another video. And these might actually make a nice cover. He's nice. To a book. And I just took, this was a title page. This was the flamingo title page. And I just took that one and used that one and just used a tea-dyed cotton tie for that one. And then I also have this very large hummingbird book, and it has quite a few. I think there's over 100 pictures, and they're double-sided, which is unfortunate, so you lose one side, but they're huge. They're really large pages. So I've just cut a couple down and apart, and I did make 2 out of those. So there's this one with the cotton tie. So that's the front, and that's the back. And it's a little longer, I think, than the others. Let's see. Maybe not much. No, the other ones are longer. And then I also did this one, and I had a little piece of this. It's almost purple, blue. And I did this hummingbird page. So I have a lot of these hummingbird pages. Like I say, I just took the book apart, and they're from the 1915. This artist, it was a very large book of all his prints. And I believe these bird book pages, the one that I cut up earlier, these are from 1908. No, this is 1915. Sorry, this one is 1915. Maybe this one was 1908. But A. Thornburn, a lot of his name is on these pictures. 1914. So he must have done a study and then had them published in the 1900s, and somebody's just republished it. But this is the hummingbird book, and I know it was around that same time frame, I believe 1915 or 1908, that he also did this. And it was Mr. Gould that did all the drawings, and then I think they're in one of the libraries, the national libraries. But I have quite a stack of the hummingbird pictures as well. So again, using the book pages as a cover is really nice if you're going to do something for yourself. But again, I have tons and tons of these as well. So now I'm just going to concentrate on putting some stuff on the insides of the journals. Maybe it was this one. I did the tea staining. Yes. So I started to tea stain the inside of this one, so I will do the seam as well. I will bend it and do some tea staining there, or distressing, sorry. And then I'm going to just go through all my paper scraps and see what I can find to decorate the inside cover. And then I want to make those tiered pockets as well to go in there. I might just do it on one side and then just do one pocket on this side, maybe something from like a large envelope. Maybe I'll put a large envelope there with a little spot there, and then have maybe 2 or 3 pockets there, and then I'm going to be adding some pages in there as well. So that's what I'm going to work on now, is finding some paper to put on the insides of these journals. For the insides, I have gone ahead and distressed the outside. Now I'm not going to distress down the center, because I am going to take a piece of this white fabric, and I'm just going to set it down the center of the spine. I'm just going to mark it right there. I'm just going to rip this guy, and of course it's going to make all kinds of threads. And the last time I did this, I spent 5 minutes trying to get all the threads off. They just keep coming. All right. And then I want to make sure I have some threads on the ends. I'm just going to cut this guy off. There we go. I'm not going to pull anymore. I'm just going to cut them so that it doesn't. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and glue this guy down the spine. Make sure it's about center. It doesn't have to be perfect as long as the center is covered. There. And then what I want to do is bend up my fold and mark with my fingernail just that fold line while pushing down on the spine, and then do the same for the other side, and then push the glue down. So that when you bend it, you don't get any little puckers. Excuse me. All right. There's a little bit of a pucker there, so I'm just going to pull this up and put a little bit of glue there. That's better. All right. Okay. Now for the right hand side, I am using some title pages from the illustrated book of wildflowers, and all I've done is taken the title page, and I want these to be 3.5 inches wide. That's what I've decided for anything that I'm inserting this. So I decided where the picture was, and I kind of measured it, and so that I'd have most of the picture on this side, because this is going to be my envelope side. So I just folded it, and that's 3.5 inches wide, and I just made sure that I had enough to put some little flaps on the top and bottom. You don't necessarily need that if you're going to sew around the outside and then up the centers, because you're going to flatten that anyway. But if you're just going to, if you want a little bit more room, leave the flap on the side and just sew up to centers. And you can sew across the bottom if you want. You don't have to, but I've just sewn across the centers. I did sew the first one on the outside, but you don't really need to. But just to keep it cohesive, I'm going to go ahead and sew across there and then down the sides. And all I did was measure. This is 10 inches long, 10 1/4 by something like that. Oops, let's turn this around. So all I did was, yes, a little short of 10. So I just made this 10 and 1/8, or 3 1/8 from one end and 3 1/8 from the other end. And that's where my pockets are going to be. So the center one's going to be, oh, wait a minute, I did that wrong. 3 1/8 and, oh, you're right, sorry, it's 3 1/2. 3 1/4. And 3 1/4, and then it gives me about a 3.5 inch. So you could make it, I just try to make the pockets a little more even, and I'm doing this in pencil so that I can erase it. So that will give me, yeah, that'll about give me about what I want for the pockets. And then I'm going to take my sewing machine and sew across there, one down the center, one down the center, and then if you want to, you can do it along here. I'm not going to. And then I'm going to take my thumb hole punch, and I'm going to punch a little thumb hole punch on the top piece of paper, and then I'm going to distress the edges. So it will look like that. So I've just sewn on each of the edges down the center, and then I've done my thumb hole punches on the top piece, and then distress it, and then I've just glued it to the page. For this side, I've just taken, and let's go with this piece. Let me just move this cloth out of the way. This was a 12-inch piece of paper, and this was a remainder piece that was left over, and it's actually 3.5 inches, so it works perfectly for what I need it for. And I'm just going to fold it in half and get about 6 inches, and we'll cut that off. And I'm going to put the cut end down, and this is going to go on this side here. And I'm going to round that one corner. Let me just move some of these things out of the way, and we'll round that one corner. that. And I'll distress the edges of this, and I'm going to glue that down. Then I'm going to take one of my floral pages, and this was a floral page, and I need 3.5 inches. So I decided what part of the flowers I wanted to show, and I figured about where it was, and I measured 4.5 inches, and I just left the page length. So all I've done is fold up the bottom where all the words were. I just wanted to get rid of those. So that was my bottom flap. And then I put it in my scoreboard after I cut it at 4.5 inches. And I just did 1/2 inch on one side to give myself a little flap. And I just angled the corners. And the other side was whatever the remainder was that I needed to get to 3.5 inches. So this ends up being 3.5 inches. And this is going to be my triple pocket. And then all I'm going to do for this one, just going to move some things out of the way here because I've been making piles, is I cut my bottom pocket. So I've done all my folds. And I'm going to take the bottom pocket and I'm going to cut it off at 3.5 inches. So I'm going to put it in my cutter here. And I'm going to cut off the bottom pocket at 3.5 inches. So there's my bottom pocket. And then I have this as a remainder. What I'm going to do is cut a little bit of this white part off because I don't really need that at the top. And I'm not measuring, I'm just kind of going by what the picture is. So I've just taken that little bit of white off. And then all I do is measure what's left. And I'm going to cut that in two. So that's 4.5, so I'm going to cut it at 2.25. So there is my 3 pieces for my pocket. So this one, and I'm going to round out these edges of this particular side of the envelope. So let's round those out and get that out of the way. So it'll follow the lines of the, there. So I'll sew these, punch my holes and distress that side and glue it in. So I'm just going to set that aside. And then for this one, I take all 3 pieces and I lay them one on top of the other, so that they're nice and even. Like that. And I take my thumb punch and I'm just going to punch a hole right about there. And get rid of those. So those are my 3 pieces of pocket. And then for this, for the top pockets, I'm going to open these flaps, and they should be the same size because they're 2.25. And all I'm going to do is cut about 1 inch from the bottom, and I'm just going to guesstimate. I'm going to cut into the side of that flap like that, and then on the front piece, and make sure they're even, I'm just going to do a little angle piece, and it's going to go right to my cut like that. Then I'm going to take one of these pieces and I'm going to go to the other side, and I just want the same height. This is so much better than having to measure everything perfectly. And I cut that piece, and then the same thing, we're going to cut that on an angle. Right up to our slice there. So you end up with these little pieces with wings, okay? And then what we're going to do is when we glue this down, I'm going to distress all the edges of this pocket and the top, and I don't need the bottoms, just the sides and the top of these where the flaps are. And then when I glue this down, this little piece slides inside there like that. So there's my second pocket. And the same with this one, we're going to distress along the top and the flap. And then that will slide inside the other one like that. So you end up with a 3-tier pocket with some paper behind it, like that. And once it's distressed, you'll be able to see the different layers of the pocket. So that's what I'm going to do. That's what I did with this one. I distressed all the edges of the pocket, the sides and the top, the sides and the top. I glued my paper down, and I did distress the edges of my paper. And because this is 6 inches long, it goes down behind that first pocket. So that's all the only reason I've only used 6 inches. You don't need, you can go the whole length if you want to, but you don't really need to. But that's what I'm doing for my pockets on the inside. And then I will work on the pages on the inside, the signature, if you will. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move forward and do all of these, and then we'll come back and we'll work on the pages. All right, so let's see how far we've gotten with the long journals. For the outside cover, I have used some more of the fabric that I used on the inside, and this is just strips of cotton fabric. I think it's an old sheet material, 100% cotton. So I've put that piece on the outside, and then I just took a small piece of trim, lace trim, and I've glued that to the spine as well. I've used some of my washi tape that I received in my monthly Creative Studio mail out box. So I'm trying to use up some of the items from that box in these journals as well. So I've added some of the tape, and then I just took this was a piece of a napkin, a scrap piece of a napkin when I was using some napkins for something else, some cloth napkins. So I just used my pinking shears and cut the piece of fabric, and then I've used this piece, scrap piece of paper, which is on the inside of the journal as well. And I've just added a few pieces of the tape on the back. And then on the inside, let me move him aside for now, excuse me, I've added some butterfly postage stamps. I stamped some flowery stamps that I had, field flowers, and I've just used my distress ink to give it a faded look. Added some of those, and the same on this side. And then I've used some of the stickers that came in my studio box as well. These are very translucent washi tape, washi stickers. So I've added one there, and then I've stamped a butterfly. And then in the pockets, I've added, I tea stained some index cards the other day. So again, I've stamped with my floral stamps and distress ink. And then these are also some of the pieces of paper that I got with my monthly mail out box. So I'm using those as well on the backs of the tag, and they're very, very thin. And then, so now there's some writing space on that side. And then these are tabs that I had cut out of some end papers out of a book that I torn out. It was green and it had a bit of a texture to it. So I sat down one night and punched a whole bunch of these green tabs with my tab punch. And all you do is fold the paper in a long fold, and when you put it in your tab punch, you make sure that this top portion does not go under the blade. You leave a little gap there so that when you punch it, you get your two pieces. If you just punch it with a regular piece of paper, you'll get a single tab. But so I sat and punched these. These are over a couple of months ago I did these. So I've added that green to the tab, and they just go in the little pockets here. And there's another one of those pieces of paper from my book, from my monthly box. And then another one as well. So I have 3 little tags in there. And then on this side, I've done also another tag, and I've used this. This was something that came in my April box as well. And this is just paper, but it's perforated in the center, so you can cut it if you will, or fold it in half if you like. So there's one of the pieces, and I've just added it to the back of the tag. And then this particular one, I used a strip of the piece of paper and then some more of my washi tape and stamped the back as well. And then in the larger one, I'm going to add some of the paper that is in the book, and I'll show you that as well. So I used this paper and then used a scrap of it for there. And then for the booklet piece, let me just move this out of the way, that's the cover. The booklet piece, I used that paper. So it was a 12 by 12, and I cut them to 8.5 by 11 so that I could put them through my printer. So I grabbed the 8.5 by 11 and I used that for my cover. And this was the scrap piece that was left over when I cut them to 8.5 by 11. And then this was a scrap piece when I cut this one down. So I'm trying to use up, again, all the pages that I have. This is another piece from my April box. And it was a little pad, and it's kind of scrapbooky feeling paper, and it's perforated, so I can rip this little piece off. So I used that piece there, and I just distressed the edges and put that on the front. This was washi tape that I had in my stash, and this is the washi tape that came in my box for April. And on the back, I again added some, and then added one of those washi stickers. Excuse me, I have a frog in my throat. These are little envelopes that I made out of a gardening book. These were all just plant pages. So I've gone ahead and distressed the edges and glued those in, and then inside I've added that paper from this little paper pad. And again, it folds in half. There's a perforation there so you can rip it or you can just fold it, and they fit perfectly in these little envelopes. So I pull that one apart, so you can leave it together or not, but they fit perfectly in my envelopes. So that will go in there. And then this was this garden maintenance, and I'll show you some of the pages that I have here. It's a harvesting record, planting records. It has graph dot paper in it, and it has a one. And it had a journal at the back for the whole year, and it just has some lined paper with all these little, I guess each day you're supposed to write in there the year and then the temperature on that particular day, but I guess you can use it for a couple of different years, and it's for your gardening. So I had that as well. And this was all one book, so I just kind of folded up the pages, and I've just made it into some type of book where I can make a list of supplies here and tools, and then I can make some step-by-step. So this is the journaling part, and then it has some of the graph paper in here, and I've just added some of the little pieces. And I've taken I received, I think I bought them at a thrift store. There was a big huge container of these little tiny stickers, and I've just put them over top of where the sun, the moon, the cloud was. So that covers up that little portion of it. And then there's another piece of graph, and I'm going to put either some of the washi tape down the side here or another piece of white paper so that I can continue to write on it and make little notes. But this is the paper that I'm going to use in there. And again, this will be for projects that I'm working on. So for this particular one, you know, I've added quite a few pages for this. And all I'm going to do is, make sure I don't bend my envelopes, sew this into my journal here like that. And this is going to be one of my project binders. So this will be instructions on how to make this, and all the items that I've used. I'm going to make lists, the books that I've used, the book from the book pages, and all that kind of stuff. I'll make lists in there so that when I want to make one again, I just have to pull this out, and all the information will be in here. What I used, you know, what tools I used, the sari ribbon, all that kind of stuff, so that I don't have to remember or go back and try and pull one of these out and try and remember how I made them. So that's just what I'm going to do with this particular one, but I'm going to go ahead and fold some more of these pages up and match the paper that I've put inside these long journals with the piece of paper that I've cut, and I'll create little booklets to go inside of these. So that's all I've done. Again, just using what I have on hand and trying to come up with a usable journal. I don't want to make journals and then just stick them on my shelf and have them sit there. I want to actually use these, so I will actually have a little spot where I can stash all of these, and it'll have all of my projects that I make in there. So whenever I start to work on a new project, I will grab one of these and write the instructions down as I go so that I can keep information. I mean, when I make these journals, I make little notes on all different kinds of paper. So I'm dumping my stamps on the ground here. And I make little notes on how I made the pockets and where I cut them, the flaps and all that kind of stuff. So I have all these little pieces of paper all over the place with instructions. And on another piece of paper, I've made a note of the books that I've used. So I try and keep all that stuff together, but sometimes I lose some of the pieces when I'm creating or cleaning up. So this will be the best way for me, is to make a little booklet and then keep the information in one particular booklet. And I can probably get 2 or 3 projects in this one as well. So again, I'm going to add in this longer pocket, I'm going to take some of these pages that I have excess of, and I'm going to perhaps just cut them into long strips and stick them in here. So then if I think of something else or I add something later, I can just put that page inside the book, maybe with a piece of washi tape in amongst where the project was. So I can keep other notes as well. But that's what I'm working on. So I'm just going to go ahead and take my book and my awl, or my little pokey tool here, and I'm going to punch the holes, and I'm just going to do this by hand. I'm not going to make a template or anything. I always start from the bottom and top, about a 1/2 inch in once everything's, and I'll use a binder clip, and then I just punch in the middle, punch in the middle, punch in the middle, and then I usually do about 3/4 inch in between my stitches. I'm then going to punch that, and then I'm just going to use my wax linen thread and sew that in, and it won't show up here because it's the same color as this lace as well. Then for the next one, I will sew it. I'll put the material on and I'll sew it, and then I'll add the lace and it'll cover up that sewing. But this one I was just kind of playing this morning to see if that would fit, and then I realized I should have waited for the lace until after I had sewn the little booklet in. But anyway, this was my test one, so this is my beginning one. I have a couple others to work on as well, so that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. Punch my holes, sew it in, and I just use a pamphlet stitch, and I usually go in the middle, in out, in out, in out, all the way up, and then in out all the way down until I come back out to the middle, and then I tie it in a knot. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do, and that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. But I'm going to stop there, and hopefully I can get these all finished and then start on another project. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel, and please leave a comment below and like the video. Thanks so much. Bye for now.